Welcome to Sunday night on Asaase 99.5 in Accra, 98.5 in Kumasi, 99.7 in Tamale, and 100.3 in Cape Coast, as well as affiliates elsewhere in Ghana, and streaming internationally on Facebook and YouTube. And today on Sunday night, we're the guests of Eric Yerenchi Dankwa. Now, who is Eric Yerenchi Dankwa, you might ask? He's the kind of expert you might want to know if you want to keep well fed. Professor of Plant Genetics at the University of Ghana, Legon, he has also served as the director of the university's Biotechnology Center and the dean of its international programs. He is the current president of the African Plant Breeders Association and founder director of the West Africa Center for Crop Improvement, or WACCI, also based here at Legon. And it is to WACCI that we have come today to talk to him. You could literally describe WACCI as a groundbreaking institution. It trains postgraduate students of food crops, genetics, soil science, and agriculture to carry out advanced scientific research with one aim in mind: helping farmers across Africa to improve their crop yields and get more reliable returns for their labour. Eric Dankwa has made his mark on the applied sciences in Africa in ways that are making a difference to millions of lives. His efforts have not gone unnoticed, and he has received international recognition for his work. But the most tangible fruit of his life's labour is WACCI, which Professor Dankwa established in 2007. He spends his nights and his days musing over how to improve productivity for farmers across Africa and how to ensure that the agricultural research that is absorbing a new generation of African scientists is backed by commercial muscle. In other words, how do we make science relevant to our daily lives in the real world? Welcome to Sunday night on Asaase, Prof. Dankwa.
Thank you, Nana Ya Mensa. A very good evening to your listeners.
Why is it a big day for you?
Well, it's a big day for me because I'm talking to, if you like, people all over the world through Asaase Radio.
Well, it's very kind of you, Prof, that you're pulling our leg again, because of course today is your passing out ceremony for the 10th cohort of PhD students that you are passing out through this centre. It is also the 15th anniversary of your foundation you set up in 2007. What does that feel like to you?
Thank you, Nanaya Mensa. 15 years ago, it was unthinkable that an African institution will achieve what we have achieved. Hindsight, many people did not believe in us. When we received the first grant from the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, in short, AGRA. AGRA awarded the University of Ghana a seed grant then of $5 million to begin the West Africa Center for Crop Improvement. Over the years, we have recruited 160 PhD students from 20 countries. Today, our 15th anniversary, today is the climax of our 15th anniversary, and we are graduating 10 PhDs in plant breeding from 6 countries.
From 6 countries?
Including 3 female students. And for us, at WACCI, every PhD is a great innovation because it can change the world.
Now, when you say over the years that you've passed out PhD holders, 160 of them, you say, from 20 countries. That already implies that you are not limited to West Africa.
In fact, the project started as an AGRA project for West Africa. But within the first 5 years, we got applications from all over Africa. And being a university, we had to open up. And so we have received students from South Sudan, Uganda, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, Zimbabwe. In fact, we receive applications from Asia, but we are unable to award scholarships to Asians. And I've said, in fact, I told the AGRA board, led at the time by Strive Masiyiwa, who you met, that until students from the global north who wish to go into international agriculture elect to come to WACCI to do their PhDs, I will not be content. So we are striving to be, if you like, one of the top tiers globally.
Is that an area of expansion that you might see for WACCI, that it gets to the point where you accept paying students, perhaps, who come from the global north?
Certainly, in fact, that is how we want to go. We need to be attractive to students from all over the world, and that would be very satisfying.
Now, it's not been only a journey for the University of Ghana as an institution. Personally speaking, it's been a big journey for you, I know, from past conversations, shall we say, that we had. Can you tell us a little bit about how, as a young boy, you came to science, crop science specifically?
Thank you. Thank you, Nanaya. Of course, I grew up in Akosombo. I attended Akosombo Experimental School. And from Akosombo, this young boy found his way at the Presbyterian Boys Secondary School. In fact, easily one of the secondary schools in all of Africa.
Presec Legon.
Presec Legon, of course.
Yeah. Not the advert for that, yes.
First 5 years in Presec, I was a privileged student. I wasn't one of those who wouldn't excel in every subject. And I could say that, and my colleagues are around, right from primary 1 through Presec up to Form 5, among the top 3 throughout, consistently. And so the natural place for me was medical school, engineering, architecture. That's where all my colleagues went to. But when we qualified to the 6th form in Presec, our assistant headmaster then, of blessed memory, Mr. Etua Aferi, did submit to us, look, young gentlemen, I want some of you from Presec coming to our 6th form science college to offer agriculture, because it's going to be one of the biggest things in Ghana. A number of my colleagues didn't listen. They went to do math or biology class. Agric was the 3rd option. So we did chemistry, biology, and agriculture. And if you did those 3 subjects, you were destined for agriculture post-secondary school. So I would say by choice, I elected to come into agriculture because I could have gone to anywhere.
What did your peers make of it?
They thought if you were smart, you had to go into mathematics and go to medical school, engineering, or architecture, etc. That's what they thought. But I think my path was defined by perhaps divine favor. Getting into agriculture, because I couldn't see myself in the medical field, just looking at patients I couldn't help. I thought good science to improve lives was in fact a more challenging task.
You wanted something that had a sense of productive effort.
Exactly, so because through agriculture we could lift lives out of poverty, we could, if you like, develop nations. I think that it is one of the areas that we need to look at seriously.
But your peers didn't directly challenge you when you made the choice to go for agricultural science.
Oh no, they couldn't. I mean, I had some of the best friends in Presec because we were like a great group. We go out, hang out together, study together, and it was assumed that we're all going to go to, if you like, KNUST or come to Legon to do medicine because, Presec chose the top students in Form 5 to come to the Asaase form. Others came from, if you like, all over the country. Of course, and you find one student from this place because he was the best in that school. So you met the Presecans who were, the key guys, meeting students from all over. And of course, we were great. I chose to go into agriculture, and I think that hindsight, I am one of the happiest and most certified person in the world for what we have done with agriculture.
And more of that later about WACCI's specific work and, and its research areas. But I wanted to ask you more generally, because of course with the effects of COVID, which exposed weaknesses in international food supply chains and the global economic downturn, the question of food security in relation to Africa has become a bit of a hot topic. And of course, we've seen the hunger in the Horn of Africa caused by a combination of drought and civil conflict, war, sadly, as well as the effects of dry weather in the Sahelian countries, which according to anecdotal accounts, seem to be buying up a lot of our Ghanaian produce at the moment. So, two questions for you. Firstly, what role do you foresee scientific cooperation between African scientists in particular playing as we seek to address some of these challenges of food security?
Thank you. You see, the subject of food and nutrition security is a very serious one. And Africa has to rethink how it proffers solutions to a problem that has haunted us for over 55 years. You look back, never have we been on the right track as a country in the area of food and nutrition security. Never in our history have we been on the right track. And I say this because you have to unpack what we mean by food and nutrition security. You are talking about all the people, 32 million Ghanaians, all of the time having physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their food preferences. Food preferences. People go and chew coconut for lunch. Is that their food preference? And dietary needs. Children need nutritious food. Do they get it? Your brains malform as a child if you don't get nutritious food. You need that for an active and healthy life. And you are talking about 32 million Ghanaians. Do they get this? Anyone who would assume that we are food secure may be joking. Look forward 8 years to come, 2030. Ghana would have an additional 5 million mouths to feed. Where are we going to get the food from? And look at the complexities. You mentioned COVID-19. That is a serious threat to our food security. And there could be even more serious threats like climate change, which is another dimension. What this means is that if we don't strive to become self-sufficient locally in food, perhaps we'll suffer tomorrow. Just to look forward. You see, you don't look at today when you are talking about food security because, of course, agriculture is challenged by good years and bad years. So assume for a moment next year there are no rains. What are we going to do in this country? People will starve to death. We are not food secure. COVID-19, you depend on imports of seed to plant. It's ridiculous. How can a nation depend on import of seed to plant? Like maize seed from South Africa, like tomato seed from Israel, from America, from France. I just can't understand why we cannot innovate to ensure that all of the seed that farmers plant are from local institutions. How do you achieve this?
Sorry to interject there, Prof, but everybody would say the logic of that is very clear because of the shock that we had from COVID, because the weaknesses in the supply chain.
No. COVID was just another dimension to the challenges.
To an ongoing problem.
But even before COVID, Ghana was not on track. In fact, any country in West Africa which submits that it's been on track may be joking. Look at the data.
And
look at how you look at food and nutrition security. I mean,
recent research has proved above and beyond COVID that there's at least 30% of the population that is food insecure.
Right.
On an annual basis. There's some localized problems, particularly in the northern regions of our country. But if I might just interject, it's sort of against the trend of previous thinking, which was very much that globalization was the name of the game. So you give specialization. You allow countries to have specializations in their areas of strength. So if you have a country that has a particularly good, well-developed capacity for growing seed and supplying seed to the rest of the world, then let it do that. For example, there's a lot of talk at the moment in Ghana about a shortage of tomatoes and onions. We have the capacity to grow tomatoes, but Burkina Faso does it better in a more cost-effective way. We end up importing from them. Scandalously, we end up importing in the billions of cedis worth from Italy every year. Onions grow better in the Sahelian countries. They're better at cultivation. Should we not develop these specializations across African countries and trade with each other?
I think it would be scary to do that. One, for the very reason that challenges could stop you from accessing imports. And so if you are not ready, if you are not self-sufficient, you might lose. Assume you expect seed from even Burkina Faso to plant in May in the north, and the seed do not arrive. What do you do if you don't have local capacity to use your own seed? Globalization can help in so many areas, but for agriculture, I think we need to look at national self-sufficiency. We have to be independent of all the countries in West Africa. Of course, the point is that we have everything. We are blessed with lands that would allow us to produce. Why don't we become the bread baskets of all these foods? We could, and take advantage of that. And look at our food import bill. Today, we are hearing $2.7 billion. Can we afford it? Is it smart for Ghana to import seed to plant, to import food and raw materials to that tune? I used to say 2.5 billion, and I just said $2.7 billion. I think we have to rethink. For the crops that feed us, like rice, like maize, like sorghum, like cowpea, like millet, like tomato, like pepper, like onions, like banana, like plantain, yam, why can't we innovate to build capacity in this country, to develop value chains such that Ghana will be self-sufficient in all these, from seed to products, so other nations around can look up to us? We can.
I wanted to get on to the economic argument behind that. So talking about the work that you do here at WACCI, you initiated the African Hybrid Maize Development Project here at the West Africa Centre for Crop Improvement, and you've produced 3 high-yielding varieties of hybrid maize or corn, which are now being commercialised here in Ghana, as I understand. Fantastic news. And in fact, the whole project has evolved into one of the largest plant breeding PhD courses anywhere in the world. Firstly, how do you see the hybrid maize project developing?
Very good. Thank you. In 2010, I hired a Cameroonian scientist to join WACCI to begin our hybrid maize improvement project with us. Over the past 12 years, it's become one of the most successful hybrid maize breeding programs in West Africa. We have released 3 hybrid maize varieties, which give us between 9 to 11 tons per hectare. In fact, they are the highest yielding maize hybrids developed in Ghana for Ghana.
What's the usual yield per hectare?
The usual yield of the varieties that we have, of course, you can talk about the potential. You can talk about what farmers get. There are some varieties developed by other institutions and even in South Africa which have yield potential of about 6 to 9 tons per hectare. But when farmers use them, they get about 2 tons per hectare. Why? It's because the varieties do not have the inbuilt resilience for adaptation to the environment and also to diseases and pests. So come disease, come pest, the whole crop will be devastated in the field. We used good science, identified good parents to develop our hybrid varieties. And I can say by instruction that any farmer who used our hybrid maize varieties, even in Tamale, Nyankpala, Daimongo, will get a minimum 6 tons per hectare. So common sense would suggest that there should be investments in such a project, which will ensure that at least, assume that 40% of all farmers in Ghana were to access our hybrid maize varieties. Ghana is off.
But this gets us into the other side of that argument, which is the knock-on effects of the research work that you're doing and how, as you said, Ghanaian maize farmers actually work in the field. So obviously, one of the things that is closely linked to maize and dependent on maize is poultry farming. There's been recent research by the Ghana Incentive-Based Risk Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, GSL, bit of a mouthful, which shows increasing differentials between the costs of imported poultry products and home-reared poultry products, and it's marked. The price of imported products is almost consistently going down, and the price of the locally produced maize-fed poultry products keeps on going up. I believe it's above 25 cedis per kilogram by way of costs for maize. So does your personal interest in agriculture extend beyond the science, because you're a plant geneticist, into these questions of the economics of agriculture? If you want to scale up your maize breeding program or your maize cultivation program, how do you get that to work financially?
It does. But you see, there is a policy dimension here. One, we work with the value chains. And we expect that the private sector would come on board the conversation so that they take up innovations from here, so they scale up and develop the seed for farmers. We don't give seed to farmers. It is the private entrepreneur who would multiply our seed. From maize, our breeder seed, you get a foundation seed, then it's multiplied into the certified seed, which is sold to farmers. One, you have to look at the business dimension, and the businessman will not come into a local collaboration if the policy environment is not right. One, because government is going to import, if you like, hybrid maize seed from South Africa and subsidize for farmers. And so farmers will access that, and any investments into a private innovation might not work.
Is that a failure of policy, or is it simply the logic of the market, that the South African variety is cheaper and so that's where the government buys?
But the South African varieties are bad. They fail in our fields during bad weather. We have developed varieties under our conditions which are suitable for this country. And so any smart investment will come into innovations like this. One, why we cannot get to the markets quickly is that the facilities for scaling up are poor here. And I say, look, Tanaya, investors in Africa are struggling to move out of challenges. One, because there are no serious investments in infrastructure. If you don't have it, you can't move forward. And yesterday I was telling your team, you look at how land grant universities were established in, for example, USA. Even in Morocco today, if you went to, for example, King Mohammed VI University, you marvel the kind of investments that they have put into a new university which can innovate and meet market demand. And once upon a time, there was a visiting delegation from Japan to Ghana. It's about 10 years ago. They moved around facilities in the university. They shook their head. They looked like they even wouldn't pass for facilities in some primary establishments in Japan. You see, universities must be the hubs for innovation. If they aren't, no country can aspire to move from low income to even middle income, let alone developed nations. You see, if you look at the model in nations which have prospered, you can even look at the Brazilian story. And I say this, before the Brazilians fought about turning their Cerrado, that is their savanna region, into bread baskets, in Ghana we had envisioned a Ghana that would use science, technology, and innovation to transform our savanna region into vast agricultural fields for agricultural and industrial development. Of course, that is what our founding president said when they opened the Organization of African Unity. Because we knew what we had to do. Have we done it? And I would say since 1967, no government, not a single government, has met expectations. Because where do you start from? You start from innovation. Oftentimes we think about the masses. The masses cannot save us. The masses cannot save us. It's the individuals who have the capacity to innovate, who can birth ideas which can be turned into innovations that will save the masses. So if I was a government, I'll think about higher tertiary education. Look at postgraduate education across Africa. How can a center like WACCI, founded only 15 years ago, become one of the best institutions in the world? How?
You have the ability to pick the cream of the crop. And our government might say that from its policy perspective, thinking of the masses is important because you need a trained skills base to make use of some of the innovations that you have. A farmer, for example, who has the ability to educate themselves about the
chicken
variety.
And the egg.
Yes.
The chicken and the egg. Which comes
first? just to illustrate the point.
Yeah.
So a government's education policy imperatives might lie with basic education. You know,
that's not the issue I was talking about anyway, but let me clarify what I said. You see, the point is, the youth will not come into agriculture. The youth, they are smart, they are not stupid. They will not come into agriculture if there is no innovation.
It's not a smart choice to come into agriculture at all?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they won't come into agriculture if there are no opportunities. So first, there must, you see, agribusinesses cannot flourish where there is no innovation. Because it's the innovation that you take forward, you develop the model for, to make profits out of the innovation. And if you didn't fund institutions, where will the innovations come from? So there will be no opportunities for agribusinesses. Look, we started an entrepreneurship program here. We have worked with MIT. We have educated the youth in how to turn ideas into innovations. And we can give some examples what we are doing in the area of youth empowerment, youth development, for transforming individuals into game changers, into, if you like, people who can survive on their own businesses. Because we have innovations here that we can walk them through, and they can become excited. For example, tomato, we have moved forward. You didn't mention my tomato work. In tomato, for the first time in the history of this country, a unit in this country has released 3 hybrid tomato maize varieties. And for this, I laud the government of Ghana. In fact, the president of Ghana himself mentioned us when he was opening the WACCI tomato processing factory, commending WACCI for the innovations that is allowing WACCI to think about using, if you like, some of our varieties for their plants.
This is in the Buna region.
Yes, that's right, in the Bono region. And I'm happy to say that the Ministry of Food and Agriculture is beginning to put some seed funds into our tomato work under the Ghana Cares project. Nonetheless, it's not what we dream about. We need to sit down and talk what we have to do as a nation. And sometimes I wonder what the National Development Planning Commission is doing about the vision for Ghana's agriculture. And I've said, Anaya, that the Ministry of Agriculture alone can do nothing about change in agriculture for Ghana's prosperity. No, they can't. Because a ministry which depends on so many other ministries to survive can do nothing. And I've advised that perhaps we need to think about a different kind of institution, coordinated perhaps from a higher level, to oversee that the ministries are working together. For example, environment, science, technology, and innovation, MESTI, should be key in the agricultural, journey. Local government should be key in the agricultural journey. We think about education itself and finance. So we need a consortium of ministries thinking about what this country can do for its agriculture to flourish. If we left it to Mufa alone, we would see that forever we'll go begging for seed when bad weather comes.
So you're listening to Sunday Night, where we are at the West Africa Centre for Crop Improvement at the University of Ghana in Legon, talking to Professor Eric Yirenchi Dankwa, the founder director of the Institute, known familiarly by its acronym WACCI. So to return to the second element of the question that I got slightly distracted by earlier on, or distracted from, you've spoken about the work that can be done by, for example, the Ministry of the Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, the central role that you think it should play in trying to promote and spearhead innovation in agriculture. This is specifically to do with things such as agricultural research. But I wondered what other kinds of key mechanisms you think Ghana needs to have in place to ensure that it is not only self-sufficient in food, but actually produces more nutritious food. For example, there's a lot of talk at the moment about spiraling costs of food, which seem to be a product of inflation by middlemen. And so a lot of talk about cracking distribution chains, or the government in somehow intervening in distribution chains. What other things do you think Ghana needs to put in place to enable people across the country to have access to good, nutritious food?
Well, I think first is the research questions that we need to ask. Are there any key projects looking at nutrition? And I think there should be. In the area of the cereals, for example, and even the root and tubers, good science can ensure that we have biofortified foods, foods that have zinc and iron. So if you took them, you don't have to go to the pharmacy to buy zinc tablet. So we have to think about good science for good foods that are nutritious. But even more important is the value chain to, if you like, produce the foods. And we are thinking about food that can store. properly. Because storage is an important dimension, and good science can also look at the storage issue. For example, tomatoes that can store longer, that are nutritious, that have quality that you need, very, very important. It's a question of building the value chain so that all over the country you would have stocks of food which are not only in the right quantities but also have the, if you like, quality that children and women and men need for livelihoods. So I would say it's a value chain, and we have to look at it how we can incentivize the private sector to come on board, if you like, value chains. So the investments are made in the right areas for the kind of research that we need to do to get the kinds of foods that we need on the markets.
There may also be questions of taste involved here. So, for example, we hear a lot about how Ghana rice is so much more nutritious than most of the imported varieties that you find in our shops, how it's so much tastier, how talking about meeting the local needs or food preferences of people in a particular place are met by Ghana rice. Ghana rice works for WACCI, whereas perfumed rice doesn't. But there is this aspirational quality to going to buying your Far Eastern, mass-produced, subsidized, perfumed rice. We know there has been scientific research done by AGRA under the auspices of Kofi Annan, bless him, into crops such as the orange-fleshed sweet potato, which has high nutritious value, I believe contains added vitamin C as well as, other nutrients that you spoke about. But how do you get the farmers to adopt these products and take them on as commercial propositions?
It's all about education. One is, before we develop varieties, we profile what we need to do. And before profiling, you look at the market needs, you look at farmer needs, you look at consumer needs. And this is what we build into the kind of varieties that we develop. And of course, because the markets are involved, the farmers are involved, consumers are involved, what you develop should meet expectations. And so, having developed it, then there must be the, if you like, sensitization, advocacy, ensuring that the right information go to the right people so that adoption rates can increase. So I would say it's all about education, and we have a unit at, for example, WACCI that is engaged in doing a number of value chain workshops, farmer field schools, ensuring that we are not only educating farmers, but also we are educating all actors along the value chain. So including market. In fact, for tomato, for cowpea, for rice, for maize, we have done a series of value chain workshops, bringing on board even transporters of food onto the table. So we talk to all of them. They know what they do. We ensure that what they do is best practice, ensuring that the commodities arrive at the markets safe.
Now, amongst returning to the subject of you and your own work, which I know you would much rather not talk about, but you are the director of this centre and it exists because of you, so one can't get away from it. So one of the baubles decorating the icing on your cake is the World Agriculture Prize, which you received in 2018 in Nanjing in China. You were the first and so far the only African to win that prize, which is big news, shall we say, in the world of agricultural awards. It's one of the world's most prestigious, and it is particularly prestigious because it's awarded by a jury of your academic peers in the Global Confederation of Higher Education Associations for the Agricultural and Life Sciences. Now, beyond the obvious question of an access to capital, what do you think are, and you've spoken about policy also earlier on, but what do you think are the barriers to recognition for Africans working in the agricultural sciences?
Thank you very much, Nanaya. I'm delighted you have recognized the World Agriculture Prize. It's a merit-based award. It's meritorious. When I looked at the previous winners and saw myself in Nanjing going for that award, I said, perhaps I should dedicate it to the assistant headmaster who suggested that I went into agriculture. May his soul rest in perfect peace. I brought that award to Ghana. It came with $100,000 prize money. And let me say that all that money is in the foundation, unearthing talent, developing talent, so that in the future I would have smarter plant geneticists working in the center. And that is what I've sought to do. Currently I have 4 fellows who are completing their national service. Their fees were picked up in the final year. During their national service, I've helped them to apply to graduate schools abroad. Their development must be fast-tracked so that they can return and then support what we are doing. It's not easy to get onto platforms that allow people to buy into what we are doing. Of course, the government is aware. But government alone may not be able to meet expectations. Of course, we know the challenges of governments in Africa. But I think that what governments must do is to put their best foot forward. And if any government didn't put the foot of agriculture forward in any engagement, I think we are losing. For example, our ministries of foreign affairs and their, if you like, bases all over the world. I would obligate them to ensure that all of them champion a cause that brings home the best of sciences, funding, etc., for investments in agriculture. You see, Danaya, there is no nation in this world which developed without first developing its agriculture. And if Ghana does not develop its agriculture, Ghana will never develop. We are not going to use a different model to develop. It's the same model. Investments, serious investments in the seed systems and the food value chains, ensuring that everyone is well-fed, nutritious food all of the time. Once we break that barrier, I believe we are moving into a stable middle-income country and a developed country in the future by, of course, promoting our products all over the world. We can do that. Value addition. How do we do this? In fact, I was struck when one of the first things that the current president did was to invite all of the top 100 institutions long ago to a breakfast meeting and advising them to think about supporting Ghana to meet the SDGs.
The Sustainable
Development Goals. I didn't hear much of an outcome of that conversation. I think the top 100 institutions or companies, how do you call them? UFI Grant has a better name for them. I think they are failing us by not prioritizing their social corporate responsibility investments. Assume we spend only 30% of the total SAR money in agriculture in this country. We won't be where we are. So perhaps we should begin a new crusade of getting the private sector more engaged in recognizing talent and celebrating talent, investing in our universities. In fact, if we don't develop world-class universities, we cannot develop. You see, once upon a time I was in Mississippi State University. I mentioned that because it's one of the small universities. I wouldn't mention UC Davis or Cornell or Purdue or Michigan State or Iowa State or Kansas State University. And remember, Kansas State University spent $219 million on research in 2019. I went to Mississippi State University when I was Dean of International Programs in the University of Ghana. The Department of Animal Science, you saw products from there feeding the whole of Mississippi State. You marvel. And think about UC Davis in California. Think about Cornell in New York. Oh my God. It is when your investors are moving forward that the nation can move forward. And until we recognize that, look at how difficult it is for a university professor to get an engagement with, official engagement with a minister of state if he wasn't your friend. Well, I've been privileged because, of course, a number of them know my work and they have granted me access to them. And I should laud the good finance minister for the good work he did with us in the College of Agriculture when once upon a time he was the chairman of our council of the College of Agriculture and Consumer Sciences. And because he knows our work and he knows what we stand for, he has come to our aid a number of times. Nonetheless, I would wish that across governments, across ministries, all of them would recognize the worth of universities. And I challenge the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to challenge the ambassadors and high commissioners all over the world to explore opportunities, win-win opportunities for Ghana in the ag development sector. I believe it will go a long way to help us as a nation.
So for the record, Professor Dankwa is also the holder of a BSc in Agriculture, specialising in crop science from here at the University of Ghana, Legon, as well as an MPhil in plant breeding and a PhD in genetics from the University of Cambridge in England. Now, Prof, you were making light of this earlier on when you were talking about your own journey in studying science and made it sound as if it had been easy and straightforward. But I know from previous conversations that you have had your moments of trial as a young man while you were studying. But also you speak very warmly of, if you like, the horizons that were opened up to you by your study abroad. Can you give us an idea of what your study in foreign countries meant to you personally?
Thank you, Danaya Mensah. I go back to 1984, June. 24th June to be precise. I had completed my final year in crop science here. Within a week, I found myself in Frankfurt Airport, and I was picked by a German farmer to his farm. I was going on an internship through the International Association of Agric Science Students. For 6 months, I worked with a German farmer in his fields. If you drove through his fields, in fact, I had gone there a year after we had gone through what I can call hell in Ghana, the drought of 1981 to 1983. And 83 was when we felt it most, because the University of Ghana had been closed down and we're home. And getting a cup of rice or maize, even for a meal, was a challenge. And I find myself in fields in Germany of maize, like from Medina to Legon maize fields. And when the maize is at the milking stage, we are driving a tractor through it to chop the maize into pieces for animals, to produce hay and silage for animals. In fact, that was the first time I shed tears in the field in Germany. When my mom, a year ago, was hungry, couldn't get food. Germans were, harvesting maize, destroying the crops for animals. I wept. Fast forward, I found myself in the UK doing a master's in plant breeding. In fact, I would say my master's was one of the highest points in my education, because the Cambridge master's is a taught master's degree. And you are taught by, at the time, all of the game changers in the UK. One reason of my success is the networks. Key persons, I don't have to mention them by name here, but one of them, Dick Flavor, another Colin Law, my own supervisor, John Barrett, my mentor, Michael Gale of blessed memory. My Gale was, oh my God, one time the director of the John Innes Institute in the UK, one of the foremost places for plant science research in the UK. He was my mentor of blessed memory. In fact, when I graduated after my PhD, he had indicated that he wanted to work with me. We brought a letter to Ghana, which was approved anyway by the government, but it went to British Council, and they said, in the British High Commission, they said, why should they fund such a project in Ghana, not Nairobi? So they didn't fund the project. But in Cambridge, we had done good science. In fact, I'll say I'm one of the foremost scientists in using, at the time, the modern sciences of that time to study plants. Now the subject that we studied in the early 90s has changed into a different subject, of course. That is why you have to train every year, because the subject is changing. You have to innovate, use the best of sciences to develop new crops. So the lessons from my academic journey, great ones. I recall when I finished my PhD, my supervisor wanted to connect me to the great institutions. In fact, I would say why Cornell worked with me to found WACCI. Because in 1991 in Minneapolis, I delivered my PhD results at the Agronomy Society meeting. The Cornell professors offered me a postdoc. They said, Eric, you have to come to Cornell for a postdoc. I took his card and said, me, America postdoc after a PhD in Cambridge, never. Ghana was my destination.
Why was Ghana?
Why? Two things. One, family, my mother. I didn't think any remittance from America would satisfy me. I had suffered with my mother. I needed to suffer with her in Ghana. I didn't want to be abroad to see my mother pass. I wanted to live with her. That was my first motivation to return to this country. Second, I thought I had too much networks and knowledge to give it out to some people. I wanted to give it out to my people. In hindsight, I've recruited the professors from Cornell who wanted to work with me those days to come here because of this project that we started together. It has been a win-win for Cornell and us. And they have come here several times to work with me. And I'm going there tomorrow to work with them. So I would say that, one, what we have tried to do here is to model the quality higher education program that I experienced abroad, here in Ghana for Ghana. And I've said to my good friend, the Minister of Finance, that until Africa stops the exodus of its smart students abroad, Africa will never develop. How can over 90% of our smartest scientists study abroad? Why should they study abroad when we have institutions like this which can train them for Ghana, in Ghana for Ghana? What we need to do is to build strong graduate schools, powerful graduate schools, ensure that we can recruit and retain the best to train the best. I have 4 smart students I'm mentoring now here from first degree. I wish that I had the capacity to obligate them to do their master's and PhD here. I don't mind people going abroad, but it should be now a split program that allow us to benefit from them when they go. And the country Ghana can do that. Look at when the Ukraine war started. Look at Ghanaians running for shelter, some studying agriculture in Ukraine. Ridiculous. When we have one of the best agricultural institutions in this country. Why should GNPC not fund scholarships here? Why should Nestle? Why should Tallow? Why should we not obligate them to fund quality training at our graduate schools? I believe there could be a model, a win-win for the government and the private sector, so that they put money in agriculture to redeem us and then propel us into prosperity. I believe it's doable because we know it all. We have professors here who can stand their own anywhere in the world. What we need to do is to provide them with the facilities that allow them to innovate and bless this country with products that can, if you like, drive agribusinesses.
Which is not to say, as you pointed out, that you in any way frown on the idea of international collaboration. You're a visiting scientist at the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell still in the United States, and an adjunct professor at the University of Western Australia. So you've just returned, in fact, from a work visit to your postgrad alma mater, Cambridge. So I wanted to ask you how important continuing international collaboration was with you, and what direction you think it should point in, because we've spoken, I think, largely about institutions in the West, in North America and in Europe, but your World Agriculture Prize came from Nanjing, from Nanjing Agricultural University. Should we be looking to the potential of the East?
Good. So many questions in one. One is, let me start from your last question from the East. Of course, it should be an inclusive strategy to develop Ghana. We are non-aligned, and so we should open our doors to any country. The seed money for the World Agriculture Prize was donated by Nanjing University, but the award was given by the Global Confederation of Higher Education Associations in Agriculture and Life Sciences. It comprises over 900 associations across the world. So the global north, the south, wherever, everyone is on board. Collaborations, crucial. In fact, the philosophy here is that we will train Africans on African crops in Africa for Africa. Nonetheless, we'll collaborate with the best in the world to ensure that the Africans we are training access the best of training so that they can impact development. I couldn't have started WACCI if I hadn't. In fact, I didn't talk about my first 10 years, my first decade after returning from my PhD studies. They were troubling and worrying. I even thought about relocating, but I said, no. I said I would come, I would stay. The second 10 years, we started innovating. I went to Cornell with a colleague, and the same person who wanted to recruit me for a postdoc led me to someone else. And he could tell me what Bill Gates would do 5 months from my visit. And he said that we could buy into that strategy. That was in May 2006. He told me Bill Gates was making an announcement in September. And if that announcement was made, we could benefit from that investment. And that was Agri's founding through seed money from the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That happened. So before Agra started, I was working with Cornell to start WACCI. And we were the first proposal in the higher education sector before Agra. And they couldn't run away from us because we had prepared, being in the right place at the right time. We couldn't have taken up the opportunity if we weren't prepared. And of course, people think being in the right place is just a slogan. You must be prepared to take advantage of the opportunities. And how do you prepare? Your mental capacity, your education, your knowledge, your networks. A couple of weeks ago, Cambridge, I went there, met with, and Cambridge, in 1987, Margaret Thatcher, the privatized plant sciences in the UK. And so the public institutions lost agriculture training. In fact, we're about the last batch of graduate students in Cambridge doing agriculture, genetics for agriculture. It all went to the private sector. But Cambridge has rediscovered itself and agreed that without the application of modern sciences to agriculture, perhaps the world will suffer in the future. So in 2019, Cambridge put together the crop science Center. Cambridge University and the National Institution for Agricultural Botany, we call NIAB. So I went to visit the two of them, Cambridge University and the NIAB, at the Crop Science Center in Cambridge. And the foundation director, he's not founding director, he's the foundation director, I'm founding director. We have done something that they want to copy because, I mean, our 15-year record is unprecedented globally. So we got talking, and you should see the outcome of that visit. Professor Giles Aldroyd has already confirmed his flight to come here in October. That is the outcome of the visit. We are thinking about, and I want them that, look, enough of the brain drain for us. We can come into a partnership if we would agree that the African students who come to you are doing split programs. So split site education is the sine qua non for moving forward. So we give the African students the exposure they need, but also they look at their field experiments in Africa so that what they come out with has implications for Africa's development. So I would say that, of course, collaborations are crucial. Strategic partnerships are very important. And you should choose your partners well. I mean, you're an eagle. You know who to fly with. You are one of the leading institutions in the world. So when you are looking for partners, you look at Cornell, you look at UC Davis, you look at Michigan State, Iowa State, you know, the great places. Because there is where peers and know your strength is in your weak link. So we don't want weak links here. We want only strong partners.
We've been talking to Professor Eric Irinchi Dankwa, the founder director of the West Africa Center for Crop Improvement at the University of Ghana in Legon, who has been telling us his fascinating journey in life sciences, crop sciences, and agricultural research, and about his hopes for a food-secure future for Ghana. Thank you for joining us on Sunday night. We've been pleased to be your hosts. Advertising and sponsorship opportunities are available through Sunday night on Asaase. For further information, contact us. You can call our main number, which is 059 279 5599. Your production team for this program has been Abedi Enim, our producer, with the assistance of Dennis Asante and John Aho, and also Mr. Jibril. I've been your host, Nanaya Mensah, and I've been so pleased to bring you the story from WACCI in Legon.